We are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Honestly, I just realized when I became a seafarers pastor that I didn't know much about seafarers before. I had the following pictures, for example, of a seafarer. Seafarers are happy because they travel around the world for free and with pay. They are rich and have many advantages in life. In the Philippines, we see the beautiful and snappy uniforms they wear at the Maritime Academy. Here, I asked my German colleague on what kind of picture he had on the seafarers, and he said, before I came to the seafarers mission, I didn't know much either. I'm from Neugraben here in Hamburg, and we used to go to the Elbe River to look at the ships. I knew that there were only a few German seafarers left, and it was not an easy job. But what do they look like? I will also have thought of seafarers' shirt and a captain's hat. That's his answer. But seafarers look very different on board in their work clothes or normal clothes. I also know now, and it was also a surprise to me that most of the seafarers on the Baltic Sea come from the Philippines. Around a quarter of the world's seafarers come from my home country. Our country consists of 7,100 islands, and you often must go by ship. But I also didn't know that so much of what we have or what we need every day comes by ship. I only learned as a seafarers pastor that 90% of the global movement of goods is transported by ship. And I realized that behind a lot of things, there is a seafarer who brought them to us. But it's almost like they are invisible. I mean, the people live here in Hamburg and in the Philippines, see the ships, and yet nobody thinks, or it is not a vivid picture to them, that there are people living and working on board and have significant role in almost all of what we have, what we wear, what we eat, drink, and use every day of our lives. When Jesus said, "You are the light of the earth, you are the salt of the earth and the light of the world," it means that the whole world is at stake. The seafarers are like people in the dark. Nobody sees them. That's why we must bring light into this darkness so that they can be seen. That's what we do in the Seafarers mission, for example. We go ourselves to the ships, see the seafarers, and listen to them, and tell them about some other information that they might need. Filipino seafarers are usually on board for 9 months, away from home and family. They rarely have contact with home and can rarely get off the ship. There are always the same colleagues on board and a lot of work. Most of them work 7 days a week or 70 to 90 hours a week. There is not much energy left. I often met seafarers who have been on board for months and they are just very, very, very tired. The German seafarers, on the one hand, work 4 months on board, 4 months, and then are at home for the next 2 months. But they cannot even plan for that. but better for them because they are regular employees, have a total of 4 months holiday with pay per year, and only 8 months on board. That is 4 months straight, then a vacation for 2 months straight, and still received their salary. But even then, a Filipino seafarer once told me that his colleague, or a German colleague, complained that he had been on board for over 4 months. And the wages are also different. Filipinos get a lot less. And they say that's a lot of money for those at home. That is also the picture in the Philippines. Seafarers are rich. That is right. When I was there, people said at every big house, a seafarer lives here or in this house. That is true sometimes, but it's not that much either. Especially when everyone thinks you are a rich or you are rich because you are a seafarer. Then the nephew, the niece, the uncle, aunties, friends, sisters, brothers come and ask, can you buy me a great Nike shoes that only cost $200? When I ask Filipinos why they go to the sea or become seafarer, do you know what they answer? They said, sure, I sacrifice myself for my family. And there is a lot of sacrifice involved here. The long time separation and much more. Going to the sea is dangerous. The second most dangerous job in the world. In addition to the long working hours, there is a lot of stress on board. It's always loud around the clock and the ship vibrates very strongly. And a lot of things that are easy to do on land are not possible on board. Many ships have no internet for seafarers. Offline for weeks. Imagine that. When you bring them SIM cards on board, they get hundreds of messages. In between, there are only text emails or the expensive satellite phone. Of course, they are happy when someone else comes on board. Like me, for example, from the Seafarers mission. Finally, they have someone to talk to. They tell me what is wrong on board. They can then complain under maritime law or the maritime labor law. But most of the time, they don't dare because they only have temporary contracts. I learned that in the Philippines, it is forbidden for Filipino seafarers to have fixed contracts. So, there is still a lot to do, to be done before things get fair on board the ships. And that is why we are pushing and advocating for the Magna Carta for Filipino seafarers, at least in the Philippines. I hope that can be approved, but I think that has been there in the Congress for years already. In the Psalms, in 107, we can read about seafarers or the merchants of the sea. It said, they mounted up to the heavens and went down to the depths. In their peril, their courage melted away. They reeled and staggered like drunkards. They were at their wits' end. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and He brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad when it grew calm, and He guided them to their desired heaven. It has become a lot more modern now and better since the time of the Psalm. But some things are familiar. Even today, storms are dangerous for every ship and the people on board. And they went up to heaven and sunk into the abyss, that their soul despaired of fear, that they reeled and staggered like a drunkard, and they didn't know what to do, just like in the psalm. That still happens today also. That the souls of the seafarers are in despair with fear. We in the Seafarers Mission take care of the seafarers, but rarely does a shipping company tell us, because they say that seafarers are tough. They can do it. And the corona pandemic is also like much a storm for the seafarers. It goes up and down, and they are at the mercy. They are afraid of the virus. They are on board many months longer than planned. Many have not gone ashore for 6 or even 18 months. And then it is said that seafarers are systematically important, but nobody sees them. In fact, they are still at the mercy of the pandemic. Only 25% of them are vaccinated. The psalm says they should talk about it, but they can't because they are still on the ships. And when they are on land, nobody can imagine or can feel what they say about storms, about how they are treated in normal times, and especially in the pandemic. People say it's seafarer's thread. So, we need to shed some light on it. That is our task as Christians, to be the light of the world and the salt to the earth, and talk about what is not going well. That's our task. But what can people do? Tell about what you heard from the seafarers. Pay attention and work to ensure that we get a better supply chain law that also takes seafarers into account. Let us bring them and put the seafarers in the picture, in the whole picture of this supply chain law. For me, this is also the implementation or the living out of the golden rule. Whatever you want people do to you, you do it to them too. But of course, it's not about what I would like to do to the other person, but rather what is good for them. And for this, it is important to put myself, to put ourselves in the other person's perspective, to see the world through their eyes, through their lenses. We must practice that today with the seafarers. For many, this might certainly be a new perspective, a new view of the world. But we can do this. This changes a lot. That is the example that Jesus set for us, to discover other perspectives, to see people who are overlooked, like the seafarers, and also the migrants and the refugees, the poor farmers and the workers, the urban poor. And then we must act accordingly to become the salt of the earth and the light of the world. May God help us to do this. Amen. Amen. And amen. God bless you.